an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Welcome in. Here we go. The 12th day of April, 2023. It's a Wednesday. Thanks for being here. It's Now and Next, Story Studio Network. Happy birthday to us. Happy birthday to us. We're 2 years old this week at Story Studio Network. How's that? We celebrated yesterday with our very first accelerator event. Fancy words for webinars that help folks launch their products. Aaron's a genius at it. I just sort of sit on the sidelines and, yep. I'm like the golf commentator. See one guy shank one into the bush. The color guy says, "Oh, geez, you don't want to be in there." That was kind of thoughtful intelligence that I was offering. But no, we spent the day yesterday with a whole group of folks who are anxious and excited about launching their own shows, and they've got some great ideas. But great ideas do not a podcast make, right? But they sure are the thing that will launch the podcast. So we spent the day yesterday walking folks through how you turn your great idea into actual narrative, into storyboards, into plans for, a whole series of 12 or 14 or however many you want to do. And typically what people find out is they've got so many ideas and they think, oh, maybe I'll start with 10 shows, 10 podcast episodes. And by the time they get through all their ideas, you got enough here for 15. So it was really exciting to see it sort of unfold in real time as a lot of the folks who were involved. We were back and forth last night after the session shut down around 3 o'clock. They kept going, and we were exchanging text messages and notes and ideas on some of the homework that they were doing. And they were all excited up until like 9 o'clock last night. We're back at it again today, and we will get into how to take all of those ideas and those storyboards now and the nit and the grit of producing it and editing it. Yeah, you too can do that. Yeah, no, and we've got some really cool options for them, and just to walk them through it. And by the end of this day, when they are finished, they'll be ready to record at least, their first trailer, maybe their first episode, but well on their way to producing the podcasts. So that's how we celebrated our second year here at Story Studio Network. And lots of great shows in the works. Engineering with Nature, one of our stalwarts. We're going to continue that show. The final episode of Season 5. Season 5 we've done with them is in your podcast app right now. Look for Engineering with Nature, EWN. And that's episode 10 of Season 5. And it's been great. This season was really cool because we had two people from the White House, as in the White House in Washington, on the show to talk about the importance of this initiative, which is all about nature-based solutions and tackling some of the forces of climate change. So it's an important topical conversation, and just one of the stories and the shows that we are in full-throated production here at Story Studio Network. We've got a couple of others that are in production right now we're excited about. There's a few others that are set to launch within the next month, so check us out at storystudionetwork.com. And, of course, Now and Next is your regular daily dose of the work that we do here. And we're in your inbox Monday to Thursday. And then Friday, we'll be back with On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast. So lots to talk about at SSN. And thanks for your daily inclusion of us in your, on-demand listening, because we know there's a lot of demand on your time. Okay, a couple of things I just want to touch on here because I have to bounce off this and then jump into our webinar series. But can we just talk for a second about this Toronto Star story? It's an exclusive above the fold, as they used to say. I'm not quite sure how it presents today. I expect that if you picked up the hard copy newspaper, it was above the fold. And good reporting done by Ben Spur. He's at the City Hall Bureau for the Toronto Star. And the headline reads, inside Toronto's, quote, sweetheart deal, unquote, with MLSE to host 2026 World Cup. MLSE, for those of you who are not up on the jargon, is Maple Leaf Sport and Entertainment. Yeah, the folks who own the Raptors and the Leafs and the Argonauts and Toronto FC. So, we know who they are. The sub-headline is, taxpayers will pay for improvements to BMO Field and other hosting costs while reimbursing MLSE for any lost revenue or expenditures. And for whatever reason, this story lit up all over the place this morning, particularly on News Talk 1010 on John Moore's show. And the outrage that somehow we were getting hosed by MLSE because, well, we were going to have to pay for the improvements to BMO Field and other hosting costs while reimbursing MLSE for any lost revenue and expenditures. And everybody got fussed because when we looked at the revenue cut, and when they started to look at how the revenues were going to break down, they would be looking at, say, they'd be entitled to half any net revenue generated by the licensing and sale of World Cup commercial rights, including sponsorships, advertising, special events, and VIP access, up to $10 million. So, first $10 million on that net revenue, split even-steven between the city and MLSE. Any revenue beyond the $10 million goes in Toronto's favor. In the city's favor, split 60-40. Okay, I don't quite get the worry about this. MLSE, as we all know, can put on a pretty good show. They know how to organize these big sporting events, right? They've been involved in the World Cup of Hockey. They have been involved in the World Juniors, all that kind of stuff that's happened here in the city of Toronto. They helped out with the Pan Am Games. So they have the expertise to do this. Government does not. The city certainly does not. So they have been included as partners in that organization. It only makes sense that you would pay your partner, right? I don't quite get the concern there. So it's not like the city isn't going to make some money off of net revenues on those very specific things. And then MLSE will serve as a project manager for improvements to BMO Field. Now, for those of you who are not aware, we've got the soccer stadium, and it's a football stadium for CFL and Toronto FC. Argonauts and FC both play at BMO Field, which is right down on the site of the Canadian National Exhibition Grounds. So keep in mind, C&E grounds, city-owned. BMO Field, city-owned. All right? The city owns those facilities. So MLSE, though, is going to help as a project manager for improvements to BMO Field, and that's where about 5 of the matches, the World Cup matches, are going to be played, they expect. But the city will pay for the estimated $25 million upgrades. Okay, well, why wouldn't they? It's a city-owned facility on city-owned property. And the city is the one that applied and bid to be a host city for the World Cup, knowing full well that in order to land that, the condition was you're going to have to improve and upgrade the stadium to a certain level that is required by the World Cup. Now, say what you will about the World Cup organization and so on. FIFA, that's just a cesspool all by itself. That's beside the point. The point is that the City of Toronto bid and won the bid, as part of the bid, for North American Games. Yay. Knowing full well that the stadium that they were going to offer up had to have improvements. $25 million. There you go. So I'm not quite sure why folks are so angst-ridden about MLSE's involvement here. Why would they ever have to pay for the improvements to the stadium because of something that's required by the World Cup. I don't get it. Now, they will be the project manager. And short of, quote, negligence or breach of contract, the company won't be responsible for any problems with the upgrades, including missed deadlines or cost overruns. Okay. That might be a soft point, but still, not sure that that is MLSE hosing the city of Toronto, or certainly qualifying as a sweetheart deal where we could have done better. Right? Now, here's the other part of it. When MLSE is involved, they're going to charge for their services and being able to help organize this. And part of that, presumably, is that revenue split. One. Two of their franchises, the CFL Argonauts and the Toronto FC, the soccer club, are going to have to be dislocated from their home field the summer of 2026 because of the World Cup. So there's costs involved there on one hand. Second is that they're going to have to, probably a revenue loss as well, because all of a sudden, you're going to go and, I don't know, play in Hamilton or wherever it might be. There are costs involved just in relocating them. There's a revenue loss just because the fan base is in Toronto. If we're moving them to another city that's going to accommodate those two professional franchises, the chances are pretty good you're going to have to get in the car and drive for an hour and a half, at least. So why do we think that MLSE shouldn't be compensated for those losses? That's part of this letter of intent. Now, I have to laugh because they said, critics say, well, there's one critic in here, and it's City Councillor Gord Perks, Ward 4, Parkdale High Park. The quote that is in the story is, "I see it as a private enterprise very typically asking government to take all the risk and at the same time asking for a share of the profits, and that worries me." That's not what's going on here. Now, what's really interesting is, based on conversation that John Moore had with another city councillor about it on another topic, and he asked her about the deal, and she knew nothing about it. So it's fair to say that Gord Perks, city councillor, has not seen the deal, has not seen the letter of intent, and does not know what the details are, in fact. Because it's not talking about a share of the profits. They're not asking for a share of the profits. They're asking for their expenses to be covered. And in partnership, they are going to split the revenues where the city of Toronto gets a 60-40 share after $10 million. You don't have to sell a lot of advertising or T-shirts or anything else around the commercial licensing of this thing to make $10 million. Now, that's not my bailiwick, but I'm going to guess that they're going to blow through that $10 million ceiling in a hurry. They're going to have more than $10 million in net revenue on all of those items. So can we stop worrying? And now I can't wait to hear how this is going to play out in the mayoral campaign, because we've already got the challenge of nobody has seen this letter of intent except the city manager. And by the way, the city manager was given the blessing by city council to go out and talk this through, figure it out. It's coming. That's what they're supposed to do. And that's what the city manager and the admin people have done. It's not a done deal. But having said all of that, our initial reflexive reaction here makes me sick on a lot of levels. First, it's just shitty reporting, and I'm not pointing a finger at the Star. They've done the reporting. The interpretation of this is really whacked. It's skewed badly. We're not asking the right questions. We're just jumping to the conclusion that here we go, big business is actually getting the benefit of taxpayer dollars. Well, that's how it works in a lot of places. Governments don't build hospitals. Developers build hospitals. Guess what? They get paid to build the hospital. We're asking MLSE to come in as a partner in consultancy and organization that government does not have the expertise to do. Period. Now, is there some room to wiggle around the negotiation on deadlines and any kind of, problems that happen with the upgrades? Probably. And I would think that would be a finer point and a finer detail. keep in mind, okay, we talked about Ontario Place earlier this week. We're getting our nuts in a knot because there's a letter of intent here to have MLSE and the City of Toronto share in net revenues that are generated by those very specific rights, the commercial rights, advertising, sponsorship, etc., where they are playing, that is MLSE, an active role in generating that revenue, right? And we're all fussed about it. But we're okay to have a private company subsidized to the tune of as much as $300 million based on what's going to go on at Ontario Place in the plan that's there right now. If MLSE had come to Doug Ford and said, we'd like to build a new stadium up at Downsview and we want you to pay for it, what would the reaction be? Get out of here. And rightly so. The folks at Rogers Centre didn't ask for a government handout when they, refurbished and renovated the dome, and everybody's all excited about it. Put their own money into it. Away they go. We would not expect government to support that. This is not, the World Cup circumstance is not that. The improvements are being made to a city-owned facility because the city bid to host the games, knowing full well that those improvements were going to have to be made. Now, story over? No, not by a long shot. Good on the Star because they've just dropped another stink bomb into the middle of the mayoral campaign that just might encourage people to get out and vote. And for that, I think we should all be grateful. All right, that'll do it for me. We're off to our Ready to Record webinar, and we're back tomorrow. Lindsay Broadhead is going to join us, and we'll get her take on that and other stories, particularly the one I want to talk about that didn't really get a lot of conversation, was the shooting in the United States this past week, and it was in the bank, and the young guy went in there, 23-year-old, starts shooting, and streamed it live on Instagram. And that kind of got glossed over in the storytelling. All of our focus on social media right now and the responsibilities of this, that, and the other thing, how do you prevent that from happening? Meta can't just throw up its hands and say, yeah, well, that's kind of, hazard of the game. No, I don't think that's that. There's got to be an answer. And to what degree can we or should we be holding social media platforms to account? I mean, they allowed the broadcast of a murder, a number of murders. So maybe we'll weigh in on that. That's tomorrow on Now and Next, right here for Story Studio Network. Enjoy the day. Now and Next is produced by Becky Coles. Our production manager is Jamie Nickerson. Audio editors are Mike Trutler and Drew Garner. And our sonic logo designer is Greg McDonald. Our executive producers are Dave and Aaron Trafford.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.